I am so excited to actually be here today on this particular day of International Women's Day and to be speaking to you on something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is actually CSR, corporate social responsibilities, or how companies can actually uh, serve society by actually making a better impact and not just like looking to make profits for their constituents and for their shareholders. I stumbled upon this topic in 2001 when I was a second year law school student studying in Parma, Italy. And I had never heard of corporate social responsibility. At the time I was in law school, I wanted to be an international trade lawyer and to practice corporate law and to work with businesses and big corporations from a legal standpoint. And the thought of me at that time never ever thought about, companies having an onus to actually be good, citizens outside of like what they owed to their shareholders. And also as well too, that was actually what was being pumped through our textbooks, right? That is what we actually heard every time we heard a company, that would actually announce their earnings. It was always what they had done in terms of the money, right? And what they had brought for their shareholders and how their shareholders would actually be happy. And so I went on this about several months actually of research to prepare a 2025 thesis paper on corporate social responsibility. And I was quite surprised or quite stunned at what the data was actually supporting at that time. And I was so excited about it. I was talking to all of my friends, all of my other law school students or classmates who were actually in it. Some of my friends at the time that were older than me that were actually working for the big consulting companies, and then they were doing management consultants who were actually working for these big companies that were actually out there making these big statements in terms of, yeah, we're earning X amount of dollars, right? And I remember being told, and actually what the data was actually showing then, that corporations had no responsibility to be good citizens, they had no business in corporate or in social justice issues, that they had no say so in terms of like the environment or actually affecting policies, and that my advocacy of that was actually too lofty. And for anyone actually expecting that would be lofty as well too. And so I wrote this incredible paper, by the way. I was just so proud of it actually. And I actually got a grade, an A in the course because what I wrote, because it was just such an incredible subject for me. And I was just very interested. And it's like now looking at the data, 22 years later, 21 years later, things have vastly changed. We've gone from that's such a lofty goal to actually have, and corporations actually have no business or expectations of actually being good social citizens, to now it's actually a business imperative, to where it's an absolute necessity for your business to actually be successful, to where now consumers are not actually wanting that. They're actually expecting you to be do-gooders of the world, to actually show that you are actually doing something to make our lives a lot better from every level, from an individual perspective, from a social economic perspective, from a racial perspective, from what your company actually looks like, to the point to where that in a study from 2017, 78% of people said their buying decision would be based upon how or what a company actually does for society. Right? And also in another study for 2019, that 78% of people said they would not buy a product, or they would refuse to buy a product if a company had an adverse stance on where they actually stand on what social issues actually are. And so now it actually, and it's quite rampant in the world of the internet age, right? And where we have globalization, where everything is it's on a click of a dime, in terms of what like the spread of information. People are actually spreading more and more on that. Even from a personal perspective, my social media, I see more content about companies that do good, that are not just making money, but they're also making an impact, right? To where CSR is actually part of, or a very central tenet of their business practice. And so I'm looking at you right now saying to you, if you're a CEO, or if you're a CFO, or if you are a chief people officer in a corporation, if this is not one of your business tenets, you're making a huge mistake. It is actually a win-win situation for the companies, for your shareholders, for the consumers, and for the world at large. We're at a place now where, and even if you do have one, it can no longer just be lip service. That it can no longer be part of your mission statement, because guess what? Consumers are asking you to be and actually looking for you to actually follow up to see what you're doing when you make these brash statements, right? A great example of that comes to mind when actually in the US, last year was in 2020. I swear everything feels like a big blur right now in terms of where we are, because there's so much going on. But looking back with George Floyd, what happened to that? What did we see happen, right? We had all of these companies that were actually out here making these brash statements condemning racism and what they were going to do in terms of like within their own organizations to be more sensitive to, to address the needs of, diversity and inclusion. We have like all these like different positions coming up for, for D&I, right? We had so many consultants coming to companies coming to actually help companies, right? But what we're finding out now, what the data is actually showing is that those back then, those practices have died down, right? It was just for many companies, it was actually just lip service, right? And consumers are now saying, what have you done for us lately? Show me the data, right? And so we're at a point where now you can no longer just say what you stand for. You actually must say what you stand up for against, because consumers are now asking, specifically the millennials, the people that you actually are hiring, are basing not only from the consumer perspective on what they actually buy or not buy, based on what you're doing in the world at large and from a society standpoint, but in terms of how it's actually going to work for you. When it comes to company culture, millennials right now are not actually, they're not just looking at how much you're going to be getting paid, but how much time will they have off? What do you actually stand for? What are you doing for the environment, for the community, right? Because right now we have so many things affecting the world today, and it's just no longer can be business as usual, where we're only caring about how much money is being placed in the hands of your shareholders, right? So I want to talk about 7 different things, or a couple more things, and actually be looking for, or we can be implementing into your CSR strategies for your companies, actually making like a very important tenet of your business practice. What consumers are now expecting from you, number one, is to be a good employer. Is to be not just to be a good employer, to be a great employer, to really treat your people with respect, to recognizing that it's not just the customer is always correct, but the most important people in your organization really is the people working for you, are the people in the cubicles, are the people that are working overtime. That's actually like that are actually producing the products or talking or interfacing with the consumers. So how you're treating those people is very, very important. They're asking you to care about them. They're asking like because they're spending, more than half of their lives working for you. So they want to come to an environment that isn't toxic. They want to be working with leaders that actually sees them as actually peers and not as subordinates, right? And they want to be treated with respect. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be validated, right? And if you have that within your corporate structure, within your corporate culture, you will have better retention. You will actually attract better talent, because guess what? Your people will go in glass doors, or that, and other different sites of Monster and any career job boards, and rave about you. So you actually want that as well too. They're asking you to actually operate in a way that's ethical. Okay, they're asking in a way, they're not asking to actually save the planet, but they're asking in terms of like your business procedures, that you are actually operating in a way that is actually serving humanity. They're asking you to also to care about the people that you're producing goods for. You're asking people like, what do they actually need? What are the things they actually want, right? They're asking you to actually take a stand on social issues. They don't want you to be quiet. Actually, more than actually taking a stand is actually showing what are you doing for that right now, for the specific causes, right? For the globe at large, what is your stand on it? Because right now, as I was saying, there's so much going on in the world that it's impossible to actually be quiet. COVID has changed everything. And I was saying the other day at an event I was speaking at, I said, there have been so many lessons that COVID has taught us from every single level, from an individual level, from a group level, to a family level, to a society, to corporations, that if you have not done anything within the last 2+ years to actually change, you haven't been paying attention. You haven't gotten the memo, because right now we're no longer the same people where we are. And we really have to effectuate and look at ourselves from a company standpoint, from an individual standpoint, and to actually like effectuate change for everybody, because we found out, guess what? We truly are connected. When asked about what was actually the most important thing for companies, it was really, how are you treating your people? That, like, to be really responsible with your corporate culture. Imagine that, right? So it's no longer just making profits for your shareholders. It's really actually pleasing your people and making sure they actually want to be where they are. They actually want to stay there. They actually want to actually evolve within your companies. And so you've got to create leadership within your companies and actually galvanize around something that's not just about selling your product, but actually like, what are you doing for the community? Because right now, what's missing in this world, what's digital world, is actually community, right? Because right now, even where I'm connecting this in Zoom with you, it's a virtual conference. We're no longer meeting like we actually used to. So guess what? Your people, the consumers is actually looking for community. So how are you treating your people? Having a voice is so important right now. And it's not just having a voice, but it's actually taking action in furtherance of this voice, because guess what? People are researching. People are looking, seeing what you were actually doing. When you made those brag statements back in 2020 when George Floyd happened, what did you do afterwards, right? People are reading the investor reports. And guess what? Your investors who actually want to invest into your businesses, your corporations, your companies are looking for that. When they see that you actually have a CSR plan, they see you as responsible. They see you as someone who's actually worthy for them to actually invest their funds into your company, right? They should see that you have a value and they actually want to be part of that. Because at the end of the day, inherently, what are corporations anyway? They're made up of people. And guess what? People have hearts. And also to, addressing just like, coming on whenever we have things that actually happen and just looking for it to be like a PR stunt. People can actually see that. They want to see consistent action taking. They want to make sure that you're not just like springing up when something happens, like making a statement about it and doing nothing about it, right? And so you need to have a CSR policy and looking to see, number one, this is what actually consumers are actually demanding. This is what your people within your own organizations actually want, because guess what? Recruiting talent nowadays, you're looking for that, okay? The last thing is that you have to understand that CSR is not a fad, it's not a trend. Wanting to have an impact in this world, it's not some lofty goal, but it's actually a business imperative. It really is going to affect your bottom line, and companies who actually tend to have a purpose behind them, that have a mission behind them that's outside of like just, make our people money, really do quite well with that business model. So it's absolutely imperative for you to be actually implementing that into your organization. If you don't have a position for right now with someone in your company who's in charge of that, do so right now. Lastly, I want to say is you need to be effectively communicating your actions and your efforts in this area of your missions, of your CSR policies to the world. Number one, on multiple platforms, right? Not when it used to be like a regular practice of like your investor relations, reports and your company's meetings, right? How are you actually communicating that to people? Because guess what the studies are actually finding as well too, is that even when companies actually make statements or to state to what their CSR policies are, consumers don't believe it. In fact, 9% of humans, they don't believe them all the time, and 67% say they believe them some of the time. So there's actually a believability issue going on as well between consumers and what companies are really doing in their workplace. So I would say as well too, it's not just about implementing or having this being like a maintainer of your business, but to actually effectively and consistently and actually passionately as well too, to communicate that. Lastly, I want to conclude with this. When it comes to economics, because I'm a business person, I'm a business lawyer for 20 something years, right? It does affect your bottom line positively, because guess what? Consumers are not only punishing you with their wallets, in terms of what you do, what you don't do. They're actually rewarding you by what you do and what you don't do beyond your products and your services. Thank you so much for listening.